Xiaomi just launched the 15T Pro, and I think it's one of the best sub-flagship upper mid-range phones that we've seen this year. But Xiaomi isn't alone in this space. We've also seen the Vivo X200 FE and the Honor 400 Pro. Now, which one takes the outright best photos and videos? Honestly, I'm not sure. Today, we're going to try and change that. We're going to go out, put these cameras head to head, and see which one does the best. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's begin with a quick look at the hardware of these three phones. Got the Xiaomi 15T Pro on the left, Honor 400 Pro in the middle, and the Vivo X200 FE on the right. The Xiaomi is the largest, and the Vivo is obviously the smallest. But there's not a huge difference between the Honor and the Xiaomi, but I will say the Xiaomi feels bigger, and I think that's mainly because it's got these hard, flat edges on the side, whereas the Honor's a bit more curvy all around. It's got quad micro curves on the screen, which you should be able to just see there, and a matching radius on the back, whereas the Vivo and the Xiaomi are completely flat on the back and completely flat on the front. Honestly, I don't have a massive preference in terms of design. I think they all look quite nice and they all feel nice in the hand. I do like the smaller size of the Vivo, but that does mean a smaller screen, which is obviously a downside in some regards. But despite being the smallest, the Vivo has the largest battery, 6500 milliamp hours, whereas these two are a bit smaller, but it also lacks wireless charging, while these two both sport 50 watt wireless charging. All of them charge really fast, 90 to 100 watts on all of them, so no major differences there. When it comes to the screens, no complaints about any of them. They're all nice and bright, nice vivid colors. When it comes to the processors, the Honor 400 Pro has the 8 Gen 3, so last gen flagship chip. The Vivo X200 FE is the Dimensity 9300 Plus, so again, last gen flagship. The Xiaomi 15T Pro is a little more up to date. It has the Dimensity 9400 Plus. Does that make a difference in the real world? Not really. They're all really quick. They can all run the most demanding games like Genshin, Wuthering Waves, etc. So yeah, plenty of power on all of them. And I won't go through all the camera specs because that's a lot to cover, but just some important things to note. The Xiaomi 15T Pro has the largest main sensor at 1/1.3 inches. The Honor 400 Pro has the most high resolution main sensor at 200 megapixels. And the Vivo is the only one to have autofocus on the selfie camera. So yeah, there's benefits to each. Both the Vivo and the Honor have 3x periscope zooms, whereas the Xiaomi 15T has a 5x, so more zoomed in. Which one's right for you? All depends on your needs. But that's enough talking about the hardware. Let's see how they perform. Before we get into the rest of the comparison, I do have a quick sponsored message, but don't skip ahead because I'm filming it on these three phones. We're going to be trying out different recording modes, and it's a great chance to see the image quality in full screen 16:9. There's also some cracking deals involved that you won't want to miss, so stick with me. This video is sponsored by Temu. I'm sure you've already heard of it. It's the place to get incredibly cheap deals on electronics, home goods, clothing, and pretty much everything else. What you might not realize though, is that Temu is a great place to pick up smartphone accessories. If you use Chinese brands like the phones featured in this video, you'll find that they have a much better selection of things like cases than your typical European site. Plus, there's guaranteed delivery, hassle-free returns, and price protection on everything. All you need to do is download the Temu app, search for my code, which is DYZ9223, and you'll unlock special lightning deals for up to 90% off, as well as a £100 coupon bundle. Now, let's take a look at what I picked. First, we've got a nice case for the Huawei Pura 80 Ultra, and it can be yours for just 50p. It's got a minimal vegan leather design, just like the official case, but this one has MagSafe compatible magnets built in, so you can use it with a wide variety of magnetic accessories. Sticking with the MagSafe theme, this magnetic tripod is the best one I've used so far, and you can nab it for just £1.88. It's all made from metal, folds down super small, but folds out to be a versatile mini tripod with loads of adjustment. You can even use it as an adapter for bigger tripods, as it's compatible with Arca Swiss clamps and 1/4-20 mounts. Next, we've got this amazing selfie stick tripod that pops open automatically when you drop it on the ground. You can get it for just £1.59. It extends up to 70 inches tall, has a built-in phone clamp with a cold shoe, and there's even a Bluetooth remote included. If you're a gamer, then you'll love the GameSir X5 Lite, and you can get it for just £1.93. It works incredibly well, extends to be able to fit compact tablets, and the fact that the USB connector is on the left hand side means it's perfect for use with foldable phones. I love crossbody straps, they're great for keeping your phone safe, but this one is on a whole nother level. By unclipping the ends, it turns into a USB-C fast charge cable, and it supports up to 240 watt speeds. How cool is that? And you can get it for just 32p. Finally, we have this universal photography kit from APEXEL. It's a bit like the photography kit for the X200 Ultra, but it works with any phone, adding loads of mounting options, a comfortable grip with a shutter button, and universal support for 67mm filters, 17 and 37mm lenses. This thing is so handy, and with my code you can get it for just £14.38. So what are you waiting for? Download the Temu app and use the code DYZ9223 for a £100 coupon bundle and access to these wild lightning deals. Now, let's get back to the comparison. Okay, so as usual, we're starting on the selfie cameras. All of these are at 4K 30, and we are using the built-in microphone. You'll see on the screen, there'll be a little symbol telling you which one you're listening to right now. The Vivo doesn't have any stabilization at 4K 30. You can turn it on, but it'll switch you down to 1080p. So I'll do that now to see how it compares, because I think the other two will be much more stable. So now the Vivo's at 1080p, but I've got stabilization turned on, and I think that will be much more comparable. Bit of an unfortunate limitation. You can do 4K 60 on the Vivo, whereas you can only do 4K 30 on the Xiaomi, for example. But without stabilization, how useful is that? Of course, you can also film yourself on the main rear camera, and you might get a better image if you do, but obviously you can't frame your shot, so hopefully I'm in the right spot. In theory, you'll see the most background blur with the Xiaomi, but how much of a difference does that sensor size make in reality? We will have to see. And if you need a little more in your shot, you could always use the ultra wide like we are right now. Again, Vivo's down to 1080p, unfortunately. But yeah, this is the kind of image you get on the ultra wide. I think only the Honor has autofocus. But yeah, which one's looking better? All three phones allow you to do a portrait video, but only the Xiaomi and the Vivo allow you to do it on the selfie camera. Honor's only for the rear cameras, so we're doing this on the rear cameras, and all of them make you drop down to 1080p to get this effect. But how's it doing? How's the cutout looking? Okay, here's a quick test of video stabilization. All of these are on the ultra wide. The Xiaomi and the Honor are at 4K, but the Vivo can only do 1080p on the ultra wide. I'm walking along at a normal pace, and here's a quick jog. Now on the main camera, and all three phones are at 4K 30. I'm walking along normally, and here's a quick jog. Now these are the telephotos of each. Obviously the Xiaomi's a lot more zoomed in than the other two, so that's probably going to do the worst. This is walking along normally, and this is a quick jog. Okay, now let's push all three phones to their maximum digital zoom. The Xiaomi will go to 15 times at 4K. The Honor will go to 10 times at 4K. And the Vivo will also go to 15 times at 4K. They're not very well lined up. I think that's about as close as we're getting. How's the stabilization and how's the image fidelity? Gotta say, the Xiaomi looks best on the phone screens, but that's not too surprising given it's the only one with a 5x telephoto. Okay, so now let's test how well these phones rack focus from macro to infinity. Obviously we're at infinity right now. If I put my hands in front, am I a little too close? Why is the Vivo not focusing? Oh, there we go. So if I put my hands in front, it should shift pretty smoothly. Vivo definitely seems to be the slowest on its main camera, but it gets there in the end. Yeah, taking ages for some reason. The other two are doing pretty good. Maybe it's the minimum focus distance. No, it doesn't seem like it. Just taken a while. Yeah, Vivo's definitely the slowest, but the Honor and the Xiaomi are pretty evenly matched. I'm going to try to do this on the telephotos, but obviously this will be pretty reliant on the minimum focus distance. We'll see. I want to keep switching into macro mode. Vivo's doing nothing. Maybe I'll switch to Pro Video and try this. Okay, so now all three phones are in Pro Video mode on the telephotos. Let's try that again. Oh, Honor's still switching. Vivo's still not focusing. Yeah, might be the minimum focus to the distance for the Vivo. It's a bit further out. It's definitely just not as quick or reliable as the other two. Whereas Xiaomi can focus pretty damn close on the 5X. But getting these synced up is pretty difficult. Anyway, I think we got some useful information there. Okay, just some differences I think would be worth pointing out about the Pro mode video on each of these phones. The Vivo is the only one that allows you to select 24 and 25 frames per second. You got 30 and 60 on the Honor, and you've got 30, 60 and 120 on the Xiaomi. But Xiaomi's the only one that lets you select log. The other two don't seem to have a log profile. And that log profile does not work at 4K 120, in case you're wondering, but it does work at 4K 60. Okay, as you can see, it's now dark and we're back on the selfie cameras at 4K 30 frames per second. The Vivo is going to be shaky, but you're just going to have to deal with that. So how they're looking? All these phones are doing a pretty good job of illuminating my face, but yeah, which one's looking the best? Of course, if you switch around to the rear cameras, things should look even better. In theory, the Xiaomi 15T Pro will look the best because it has the largest sensor, but is that the reality? We'll have to see. And if you use the ultra-wides at night, this is the kind of view you get. Obviously the Vivo's down to 1080p again. How's things looking? Definitely won't be as good as the main sensor, but might be better than the selfie camera. Now a test of the stabilization in low light conditions. This is the ultra-wide on all three phones. I'm walking along at a normal pace, and here's a quick jog. Now here's the main camera, walking along normally, and here's a quick jog. Switching to the telephotos, that's 5 times on the Xiaomi, 3 times on the Honor and the Vivo. Here's walking along normally, and here's a quick jog. Now let's see what all of them look like at their maximum zoom in low light conditions. Push the Xiaomi all the way out to 15 times zoom. The Honor goes all the way up to 10 times zoom. And the Vivo goes to 15 times zoom. Okay, we're back on my favourite really dark street at 4K 30 on the selfie cameras. And I'm very backlit at the minute, but I'm walking up to a street light now, so you should see some light on my face in a second. All looking very dark. Hard to say who's looking better from looking at the phone screens. Maybe the Xiaomi now we're under the light, but you'll see better than me on a big screen. Now on the main rear cameras, starting out backlit. If I turn around and face the light, how do these look? Now a quick test of the stabilization in extreme low light conditions. These are all on the ultra wide, and I'm just walking along normally, not going to run around in the dark. So now switching to the main camera, which should look a lot better. but it's extremely dark here, so don't expect miracles. And finally, we'll do the telephotos. 5x on the Xiaomi, 3x on the Vivo and the Honor. I would expect the Vivo and the Honor to look a bit better because they're not having to stabilize such a long lens. But how are they doing? Okay, so time to look at some photos, and we're starting with a selfie on the selfie camera. These three phones. Apologies, the Xiaomi does not apply the watermark on the selfie camera, and the Xiaomi and the Honor are both mirrored, whereas the Vivo isn't, but you're just gonna have to live with that. So all of them have got quite different skin tones here, and I think at a glance I'm liking what I see from the Vivo. The reds are a little too high on the Xiaomi shot, and I just look kind of pale overall in the Honor shot. Honor's also made my jacket a bit too vibrant, like it's quite a dark navy color, which I think the other two phones have got more correct, and the logo's looking really vibrant on the Honor shot, which I don't love. Yeah, I don't like the Honor one very much. I don't look particularly healthy. I think the Vivo's much more flattering, and the Xiaomi's somewhere in between. Vivo's definitely the sharpest if you look around my eyes here, but again, it is the only one that has autofocus, so that does make sense. I think I'd give this one to the Vivo, followed by the Xiaomi, followed by the Honor. Okay, now the same shot, but with portrait mode turned on. At a glance, my eye is drawn to the Xiaomi shot because I like these out of focus bokeh balls that have been added. I think that looks quite nice. The Vivo effect is a little more subtle, and the Honor looks pretty fake to me. Also, the cutout isn't great. I'm not sure what's going on here. I think that's part of the path behind me has been cut out, and it's really bad around the brim of my beanie, which is kind of weird because it's not exactly that hard to cut out a beanie. Unsurprisingly, we're seeing basically the same thing with the skin tones. I think they might be marginally improved using the portrait mode. But yeah, this is between the Vivo and the Xiaomi for me. I would give it to the Vivo for the skin tones, but I do like Xiaomi's portrait effects here. Now moving on to the main rear camera of each phone, and I kept these all in their default color profile. So Xiaomi is like a vivid, Honor is in its vibrant profile, and Vivo's in its vivid profile. So I just did that to make sure they're evenly matched. Again, we're seeing quite a difference in skin tone between the three phones, but this time I'm not so sure that Vivo's doing the best. Yeah, I think I prefer my skin tones on the Xiaomi shot. Honor's not too bad, although there's like a weird HDR effect going on. Like it looks like the exposure's been turned down on my face, which is a little strange. All three have loads of detail, but I think Xiaomi's looking the best in terms of skin texture. Honor just looks a little odd, maybe slightly smoothened. And Vivo's pretty close to the Xiaomi, but the skin tones just aren't doing it for me. In terms of background blur, not a huge difference between the three. You can see like this area is blurrier on the Xiaomi than the others because of the larger sensor, and you can also see that in this tree in the background. Yeah, so not a massive difference, but a difference. I think Xiaomi's got the best color for my jacket, Vivo's close, and then Honor is in third, so I'll give this one to Xiaomi. Now, portrait mode shots using the rear camera, and here we'll have a pretty big difference. Part of that's my fault. I accidentally left the vintage filter on the Vivo, which is why we got these kind of bluish tones. Honor uses the Harcourt portrait modes when you use the rear cameras, and this is in Harcourt color, which is my favorite one, but it does give that kind of sepia golden look to the image. And Xiaomi's in the normal like a vibrant profile, so we shouldn't see any major shifting in the color from our last shot. Vivo's cutout is the worst for sure. Got this weird mist area around my cheek. Skin tones I would say are the worst too. Still prefer the Xiaomi overall, I think, and I like that it's not done just a completely basic cutout. Like my face is in focus, but my shoulders are slightly blurrier. I think Vivo's done a less good job with that, and Honor has just kept more of the image in focus overall. It just can't quite match the skin textures and sharpness of the Xiaomi shot. So yeah, Xiaomi for me, followed by Honor, followed by Vivo. Now we've got some macro shots of this flower taken on the main sensor of each phone, and I did try to get as close as I could, tried to get around the minimum focus distance of each phone. Not a noticeable difference between the Honor and the Vivo in terms of minimum focus distance. I think the Xiaomi can get slightly closer, but it's not a big difference, as you can see. Zooming in a bit, all are looking pretty good. The Vivo's slightly punchier and contrastier, but that is mostly down to the picture profile rather than anything else. I'm going to have to zoom quite far to see much of a difference. I think the default sharpening is a tiny bit high for my tastes on the Honor, but it doesn't look bad. I kind of like that punchiness of the Vivo the longer I look at it, but Xiaomi's a bit more natural looking. So I think this one's all down to personal preference. I like that the Xiaomi can get closest. I like that it's got a nice natural look, but I do quite like the punchy tones of the Vivo in this one. So I'll leave that one up to you. And now we've got the same thing, but using the telephotos. So 5x on the Xiaomi, 3x on the Vivo and the Honor. And I tried to get as close as I can. So trying to hit that minimum focus distance. And I can already tell, kind of missed it on the Vivo, got a little bit too close, but the difference is plain to see. The Xiaomi can get the closest on its 5x by a long way, followed by the Honor, followed by the Vivo. And if we punch in on the details, Xiaomi's the only one that's really been able to focus this close. Honor's more focused up around here, but the area that is in focus looks pretty fantastic, I think. Love the colors in this one. Like, I love everything about this image. I just got slightly too close, so this area of the frame is a little out of focus. Vivo not doing so hot. Like, the very back of the flower is still in focus, some parts down here. It's quite a noisy image, and yeah, it's just done the worst. If we look at these in the back, these flowers in the back look good. They were actually in focus, but I think it's safe to say Vivo did the worst here. Xiaomi did the best, and Honor's right in the middle. Now, I don't have anything to compare this Honor image to, but if you just focus on the middle of the frame here, Honor is the only one to have autofocus on its ultra-wide camera, and it's the only one that can do macro, and you know what? It looks pretty good. Personally, I don't really like using ultra-wides for macro because you get quite a distorted image and you can often have your own shadow in the image. But it's there if you need it. Maybe you like ultra-wide macros. It can be an interesting effect from time to time. And the Honor 400 Pro is the only one of the three that will allow you to do that. Now here's a run through of the lenses pushing all the way out to our maximum zoom on these three phones. Starting with the ultra-wide. And aside from a slight difference in exposure, hard to see much of a difference at a glance. But what about when we zoom in? Immediately see how low resolution Vivo's ultra-wide is. The lowest resolution of the three, only 8 megapixel, and it looks crap. Like, if I draw your attention to this telegraph pole in the distance, that's just a blurry mess on the Vivo. Quite crisp on the Honor, and sort of in the middle on the Xiaomi. But when we talk about image processing, Honor's grass looks really weird, and Vivo's doesn't look much better either. I think it's a much more natural looking image from the Xiaomi here. Yeah, it looks like there's a cartoon filter on the Honor shot. Very, very weird. See if that changes as we push in a bit. So now onto the main cameras. A bit more warmth to the Xiaomi shot here. Very blue image from Honor, and pretty blue tones from Vivo as well. But this should look a lot better than the ultra wide. The sharpening is definitely more heavy handed with both the Honor and the Vivo. Again, I think Honor's looking the worst with the like weird cartoonish looking grass and kind of over sharpening the road down here. But I do think the clarity is better at a distance with these two than it is on the Xiaomi. But Xiaomi's again the most natural and photo-like, more like what you'd see from a camera. These are a little over-processed for my taste. All right, now we're going to jump to 70mm-ish, which is the telephoto on the Honor and the Vivo, but a digital crop on the Xiaomi. Not exactly what I was expecting to see here. Because this is a native optical lens for the Honor, I would expect it to look better than the Xiaomi, but it doesn't. And neither does the Vivo, to be honest. I think Xiaomi's got the best clarity here. You can almost read this address on this house down here. Sorry, whoever you are, doxing you a bit there. It's definitely worse on the Honor and the Vivo. And in the distance, I think the clarity is best on the Xiaomi as well. So none of them are bad, but you would expect the native telephotos to perform better than the digital crop on the Xiaomi. and I don't think they do. Now jumping to 115mm-ish, which is 5x on the Xiaomi, and a digital crop of the telephotos on the Honor and Vivo. The difference should get even bigger. Let's keep zooming on this in the distance. Pretty plain to see. Bricks look better, more natural on the Xiaomi. You can see a lot more of this house in the distance, whereas Honor's incredibly crusty and Vivo's somewhere in the middle. And at 20 times zoom, same thing. Xiaomi's the best, followed by Vivo, and Honor's tailing behind. And at 50 times, which is the maximum zoom for the Honor, we're seeing the exact same thing. However, Honor has a trick up its sleeve. If you enable the AI image processing on the Honor, you get this, which is generated by AI. And, well, obviously it looks the cleanest and it looks the best, but it's not all real. This is one of those features that I'm always impressed by, but I don't think I would ever use. Because basically it just makes things up. It's completely changed the design of this house. It doesn't know that these are just like PVC windows, and it's turned them into like wooden beams. It's added this object in the front of the house. It's completely changed the shape of this car. It looks like a Jeep type thing. Now it's got a swoop to it. So yeah, the generative AI thing is there if you want it, but I just don't think I want it. And finally, Xiaomi and Vivo can go all the way to 100 times, but you shouldn't, because it looks like this. Let's move on. Okay, moving on to some nighttime shots, and there's a pretty big difference between all three here. Immediately, the Vivo is jumping out at me as probably the best image, and Xiaomi is looking probably the worst. Very flat, very dull, kind of washed out colors. Maybe looks a little bit soft, but let's zoom in and check these details. Yeah, okay. Zooming in a bit further, loads of weird AI squigglies on my face on the Honor shot. Really don't like that. That looks very strange on my stubble around my face. Vivo for sure pulls ahead with skin tones. Detail's not bad on the Xiaomi shot. It's just very dull and grey, tiny bit grainy. I wouldn't say any of them are super bad, but I don't love what Honor's doing with the image processing there, and I think Vivo is a clear winner. Now with portrait mode enabled, all got some pretty nice effects, lots of nice bokeh balls on all of them, but I can see Xiaomi has messed up the cutout around the top of my hat. So has Honor. Vivo's looking a tiny bit better, but it's missed an area down here, so not perfect cutouts on any of them. Xiaomi looks blurry around my eyes, and again, super grey, dull colours. Still got some weird processing stuff going on with my facial hair. Maybe not as bad as in the last example. I think overall Vivo's done the best yet again, although I do quite like the colours of the Honor shot, but when you zoom in and look at those details, it's maybe not the best. Now switching around to the rear cameras, these are all taken in the standard photo mode. The blur is just the natural blur you get from the lenses. Xiaomi's looking a little overexposed to me. The other two are a bit more balanced. And zooming in a bit, they're all looking quite good, but I just think the exposure is way too high on the Xiaomi. The Vivo and the Honor look better to me. I'm leaning towards the Vivo again. Something about the sharpness and the colours is just kind of a little more pleasing, but those two are quite close. And Xiaomi did alright, but it just needs to be taken down by about half a stop to look really good. Now a quick run through of all the lenses outside Slim Chickens, which always gives some interesting results in these comparisons. First thing that jumps out is that Honor has blown out the highlights on these LED wall things, where the other two seem to have reined it in a little bit better. Quite a moody, contrasty look from the Xiaomi, but I don't mind that. I think that looks quite nice. Cropping in a bit, you can clearly see the lack of image fidelity from the Vivo ultra wide here. The ground is very soft and mushy, not a lot of detail to anything. Pretty stark contrast with the Honor, which is a much more detailed image, and Xiaomi is somewhere in between the two. Overall, I think Honor has the best image quality, but the exposure isn't handled very well. I think Vivo and Xiaomi did a better job with the exposure on this one. Now moving on to the main lenses, and there's a difference in colour, but these video walls were changing colour, so they're never going to be exactly the same. Zooming in a bit on the Slim Chickens frontage, I think the quality of the Xiaomi and Vivo are pulling ahead. Honor looks a bit crusty, like this backlit text is kind of distorted. It's not awful, but yeah, just a little too bright again. I think it's pulled the exposure up a little bit too high and the images suffered because of that. Xiaomi and Vivo might be too close to call, honestly. Really quite similar. There's differences in the way they've rendered the red neon signage. They all look quite different, but I think that is a matter of preference. So yeah, now moving on to the telephotos, and as always we're going to have a pretty big difference in the field of view because the Xiaomi's more cropped in. Here all the neon signs have been rendered more similarly, but I don't like what Vivo has done. These have become illegible on the Vivo, whereas you can read them pretty clearly on the Honor and the Xiaomi. All very close actually. I like that you can still see that the text is red on this backlit signage. All have managed not to blow out these video screens despite them being bright in a dark environment. Yeah, very close that actually. I was kind of expecting Xiaomi to do the worst because it's got such a long focal length and that's challenging to stabilize in dark conditions, but it's done a great job. So yeah, I can't really pick a winner here. I think they've all done a really good job. Maybe this telephoto shot will give us a bigger difference. I just like the way these reflections looked, so took a telephoto shot on each of them. Obviously we've got that difference in the field of view again. Can we tell anything in terms of quality? The Vivo is jumping out to me with its sharpness on this bar down here. I think that looks really good. It looks very soft and hazy on the other two shots. I think there's maybe a little more clarity in this metal structure as well. But yeah, honestly, not a lot in it with these, but I do think Vivo pulls ahead there. Now one more comparison, using all three telephotos again. Slight differences in colour here. I do quite like the bluey tones that have come out on the Vivo, and you're seeing that a bit on the Honor as well, where that's more slightly toned down on the Xiaomi. So obviously this isn't a fair fight because the Xiaomi is more zoomed in as standard. But if you look at this signage on all three, you can see that Honor is really lacking detail, quite soft, some weird processing going on this sign in the front. In theory we should be able to zoom further with the Xiaomi, and it looks like we can. But yeah, considering the difference in focal length, I think Vivo's done an excellent job here, and I might call that the winner because I really like those colours as well. Now closing things out with our shots from the really dark street, starting on the ultra wide. At a glance, Xiaomi and Honor pretty similar. Vivo not so good. Yeah, loads of motion blur in the Vivo. Ooh, and actually when you zoom in, Xiaomi's done a better job. There is some weird processing stuff going on. The road is all swirly, but look how good this bush looks compared to the bush in the Honor shot. Clear winner for me. That one goes to Xiaomi. Now moving on to the main lens. We've got some interesting lens flares on all of them. I quite like this like weird petal shaped thing we got going on, both the Vivo and the Honor. Slight lesser extent on the Xiaomi. Tiny differences in colour, but not major. So Vivo's got the darkest exposure overall. Honor I would say looks the most processed. Like this foliage doesn't look very natural to me. I think Xiaomi's done the best job. I quite like these starbursts we've got coming from the streetlights. They look mad crusty on the Honor, and they're just big blurry balls on the Vivo. So yeah, they're all decent, but I think Xiaomi takes a lead there. Now closing with the telephoto, and I'm not sure all of these use the telephoto. In fact, I don't think the Xiaomi or the Honor chose to use the telephoto in this case. Xiaomi looks terrible because it's just doing a massive 5x crop on its main sensor. You can tell that because it says f1.62, and I think the same goes for the Honor, whereas Vivo at f2.65 should actually be using its telephoto. And you know what? Doesn't look great, but it definitely looks better than the other two, so Vivo takes that one. Right, so I think that's about it for this one. I hope you found it useful. For me, I've got to say the Xiaomi 15T Pro impressed me the most frequently across pretty much every category. But that's not to say the other phones don't have their advantages. Its selfie camera isn't the best. I think the Vivo selfie camera is much better for photos, and strangely the worst for selfie videos. But yeah, that's what we're dealing with. The Honor, meanwhile, has some cool AI trickery, which isn't really my kind of thing, but you might like it. It's also got the hardcore portrait modes, which I think are quite nice. And the ultra-wide, in some instances, does the best, but not always. But yeah, that said, overall, gotta go to the Xiaomi for me. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree. And if you like this kind of thing, get subscribed, because there's always more phones on the way. And I will catch you in the next one. Toodles.